morning all, or good afternoon actually. Let's not repeat morning, let's just go to morning. Hello, Jennifer McKay, we see you over there. I see all of our friends that I have missed seeing over the summer with Diane and Stillwater and Barbara and oh my goodness, everybody. Misty and Sharon I know are on, so we are so happy to see your faces. We wish we were meeting in person, but we know that's not always feasible for those of you that don't live here in the metro area, but we are glad to be able to connect with you once again. I hope everyone had an opportunity to relax this summer. My goodness, I know we all needed it, and we are ready to get going again. I'm going to put the link to the running agenda in the chat in case you did not get that earlier. For those of you that are not familiar with our RSA meetings, we just keep this document going for the whole year. And at the bottom, you'll notice the link to last year's running agenda because we keep a lot of resources and things on these agendas just to kind of help give you some things to go on. As we're getting started, if you don't mind, just jotting down in the chat who you are and where you're from so we can kind of keep track. That helps us know who's logging in and who we might need to connect with for some later questions. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Melissa Algrim. I'm the Director of Reading Sufficiency. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues. Deb, would you like to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Deb Wade. I am the Director of Elementary English Language Arts.
Okay, and Brenda?
I'm Brenda Beamer Chapman, and I'm the Director of Social Studies and Personal Financial Literacy. And you may hear from me because I also review RSA reading plans. So if you see my name, it's because I'm contacting you about your plan.
All right. So, and just so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can all be looking at this together. So as we are, oh, I don't want to make a comment. I just want to blow this up a little bit so we can all see it a little more easily. You can connect with any of us. There's our email addresses, myself or Deb and Brenda. If you have any questions about RSA, Deb and Brenda do a great job of being able to find those answers or yell at me to say, hey, by the way, somebody's really needing this. So just a great way, and also a wealth of knowledge in their areas of elementary English language arts and social studies. Okay, so let's get right down to it. So over the summer, we did some updates to our screening assessments. We met with the State Board of Education. We did this last spring a review of screening assessments so that if we wanted to see if we needed to add any to our list. We did not take any off of our list. We did not feel that this was the appropriate time to say, nope, we're taking this assessment away. We only added on. The State Board did approve the addition of 3 screeners starting with the 22-23 school year, not this year. You'll see this document on the state website on the RSA coordinator page. If you will recall, we have our same 7 screeners that were previously approved in place this year and will continue to be in place next year. There's Academies, which is formerly Dibbles Next, Ames Web Plus, FastBridge, iStation, Map Growth, Dibbles 8, and I know these two get confusing because they share a name, and then the STAR Early Learning System, which means STAR Early Literacy and STAR Reading that work together, okay? Starting next year, we will also add 3 additional assessments to this list, iReady Diagnostic, Amira, which is a brand new assessment, and then Map Reading Fluency, which can work in tandem with Map Growth. Okay, so I know some districts might want to explore those 3 options, but do remember that for this 21-22 school year, you will need to make sure you're using one of these 7 that are approved for this school year. Okay. Also, at the same time, the State Board did approve screening for dyslexia. Please remember, dyslexia screening is not required until the 22-23 school year. This year, we are just getting some processes in place, but I wanted to make you aware because I have been getting a lot of questions about it. So those screening assessments for dyslexia that were approved by the state board there were 7 of them. All of them align with one of our approved RSA screeners as well. So again, Acadience, Amira, FastBridge, iStation, the Map Reading Fluency, Dibbles 8, and then the STAR CBM. 4 of these assessments, which would be Acadience, FastBridge, iStation, and Dibbles 8, were approved on the condition that we would also administer the phonological awareness screening test or PAST test for that advanced phonemic awareness skill. The PAST test can be found online at no cost, so that does not incur an extra cost, but just realize that that would be an additional supplement that would need to be in place for those. So if you're in a district that, let's say, uses iStation as a screening assessment already, you can also include that as your dyslexia assessment, but you will also need to administer the PAST assessment. I know that the Office of Special Education is working on guidance for exactly how this screening will take place and how to utilize the data this fall. That will be forthcoming. So don't stress yet, just be aware that this is the first step that we've got in place and that we will be getting more information to you as the year progresses, and it will be there in plenty of time before we have to do anything next year, okay? All right. And finally, when we're talking about screening assessments, I know that many of our districts use the STAR assessment, and Renaissance updated their scale over the summer. They had been playing with that a little bit. They are no longer using the enterprise scale, which used a separate scale for early literacy than from STAR reading. They have now transitioned to a universal scale, which puts both assessments on the same continuum. The technical guidance on the SDE website has been updated for STAR. You will find it on that RSA coordinator page. There's also this direct link there on the agenda. I'm trying not to make you seasick as I scroll, but at the very back, you will see the universal scale. This number looks a lot different because we are used to saying that magic number, that end of year 3rd grade target was a 393. It is now 969. So remember that they've taken 2 separate things that did not align, and now they've put them in order and aligned them. So even though the number looks a lot larger, it's still the same equivalent expectation. It's just a different number. Okay, so don't freak out on us. Okay, it's still considered that 40th percentile. They're not being asked to learn new skills or demonstrate new knowledge that they weren't asked to be able to do before. It's just like taking it off of a 10-point scale and now putting it on a 100-point scale. So instead of a 9, they're now getting a 90. So this would be this new number we have to memorize, but it's still the same expectation. Okay. All right. Just, we don't want to panic over that one. Any questions on that screening assessment? Because I know that STAR change has really been bothering a lot of people.
I would just ask Misty if you answered her question.
She did. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Whatever the question was, I'm glad we answered it.
I know Misty would just say, so that's why I said that. Okay, we do have another question. Is dyslexia screening going to be under RSA or special education?
Well, that's kind of a good question, and that's something we've still been talking about too. We need to get with Todd Lofton, our executive director or actually deputy superintendent for special education, and make sure. I know that Michelle DeBerry, the specialist in special education that's been working on that, has been really taking the point there, but we do need to clarify that. So we'll get an answer for you next month. As far as how many times a year, Diane, that we do that, the statute just requires that we do this at the beginning of the year. But again, that guidance will be forthcoming just to address frequency. Who can do it? By the way, it's anybody who's a certified teacher. This is not limited to a specialist or a special ed teacher, a psychometrist. We were very intentional in the review to make sure that there did not have to be those specialized credentials to overload a specific person. We will have documents that will help explain those numbers for you. Matter of fact, that was one of the requirements in order to be approved, that they would have some of those things, but we are also creating things that districts can use as well. So we will have that. We don't have it in place just quite yet. We need a little bit of work time. Our first step was just saying, what does the assessment even look like? So be patient with us, and I promise that we will have that. Regardless of who is ultimately going to take the lead on the dyslexia, whether it's the RSA office or special ed, we are communicating very closely together. We will continue to provide updates on this meeting just because we need that information out here as well. So no worries there. Okay, a couple of other updated RSA documents that I just wanted to make you aware of. Again, these are on our RSA coordinator webpage. Is the family guide for reading sufficiency. Went through and just made sure that the language is updated so that you can have this for parents to be able to make sure that they understand the process. I use this often when I have parents calling and saying, I hear about this third grade retention thing, what's going on, so that we can help explain, here's the process. So the first page is really just talking about what is a successful reader. What are we trying to do? We're trying to make sure that our K through 3 students know how to read and are able to do this. And here's what each of the entities can do. You know, the student can show up and be engaged. You know, there's some responsibilities there. The family can make sure that that kiddo is there. There's some things that they can be doing, as well as the school, and then what we're doing at OSDE. And then specifically, what does this mean for a third grade student, helping them to understand that, as well as our different pathways to promotion. So just reminder, that first pathway is meeting the RSA criteria on the state reading test. That triggers having that conversation. It does not require that we automatically retain a student. It says we have to discuss which is the best option. Thank you, Deb, for putting those links in the chat. If they do not meet RSA criteria on the state test, the next option is to see how did they do on one of their state board approved screening assessments, the STAR, the Acadians, any of those things. So that end of year third grade target. So on that technical assistance page that we looked at earlier, the number that's great, big, bold in red, if they can score that number at any time during first, second, or third grade, they are eligible for automatic promotion. The 7 good cause exemptions, remember there have been some updates in the last couple of years. And I know with all of the confusion behind COVID, it's really sometimes difficult to remember those updates. So make sure that you're reading through those carefully, especially when we have students on an IEP or that have had a previous retention. And then finally, for students that we don't meet any of those other requirements, then there is the student reading proficiency team, which would be the third grade teacher, a fourth grade teacher, and the family or parent and a reading specialist if one is available on staff that can decide what is best for this student. You would want to look at data like what was attendance like? What was their classroom experience like? What were they doing in class? Were they able to do things in class with maybe minimal support and but just freeze up at a test, have that severe test anxiety where they could probably be okay? Or are they receiving intervention and have made great growth? They're not quite there yet, but we think they can get them there if we continue what we've been doing. Those would be times that regardless of whatever test scores they have, this is something that we might want to consider looking at for promotion. Conversely, if they've missed an inordinate amount of days, or they're constantly gone, or they're not seeing any growth whatsoever, we haven't found what's clicking for them, then at that time it might be a good conversation to have about how we can intensify their supports by repeating third grade and adding in more intensive interventions at the same time. Okay, so this is just a resource to be able to hand to parents. It's helpful maybe at conference time or at the beginning of the year, maybe not at the very like back to school night, because that can be a little bit of a trigger. But if they're trying to help explain, here's what we're looking at, especially for a student that might be struggling and have that program of reading instruction. We've also made sure that the quick guide has been updated and is also on the website. Okay, this is meant for school personnel, not for parents, just to help remember what it is that we are required to do to meet the requirements of the Reading Sufficiency Act. Again, not trying to make you seasick, but just letting you kind of see, same thing, just putting it in plain English. Here's what the exemptions are. Here's what we do for probationary promotion, things like that. Okay. All right, and I'm just kind of, again, glancing.
Okay, before you move any further, there was someone who wanted to know if there was a document that would help explain the new STAR numbers for kindergarten and first grade.
That we would need to contact Renaissance. So if you are using STAR, I would contact your rep from Renaissance to see what they have provided to help best explain what those numbers are so that parents can see them. And I think that that is probably something they have prepared. I just haven't seen it. I don't have access to it. Okay.
And maybe just a clarification, how many times do we give the dyslexia screener?
That one, the statute requires that just at the beginning of the year based off of those scores, but again, we'll have more specific guidance forthcoming later in the year as that gets developed. But again, we don't have to worry about that until the 22-23 school year.
Okay, Misty also shared that STAR has some videos available on their resources page.
Wonderful, thank you, Misty, that helps.
One other question so far, how do we determine if a child is 6 months to a year behind from the NWEA map growth?
Okay, I am going to just very quickly go to the coordinator page and come down to our technical guidance and here on map growth. Okay, a quick rule of thumb, squint if it makes you sick, okay. So if let's say I'm looking at a second grade student at the beginning of the year, those students that would be on target would be scoring about a 168, okay? That'd be, you know, they're doing okay. Students that are scoring about a 162, around in this range, that would be, Jeff, the ones that you're asking about, that 6 months to a year. Students that are scoring below that, they are actually much further behind, okay? And so they're going to need quite a bit more. So it's not an exact, but it gives you an estimate around in there, okay? All right. So that's how you can use those sheets. All right, one other thing I wanted to make sure that we were aware of, I've been getting a lot of questions about, is our portfolio. Remember that all third grade students who are on an individualized program of reading instruction or an academic progress plan automatically should be getting a portfolio started. You can find an updated portfolio checklist. Deb has dropped the direct link in the chat. It's also on our RSA coordinator page and on this document. Again, just kind of that requirement. We need to make sure that these are the documents that we have. They should be showing that they are able to do these basic things. Again, our screening assessments can help with this information. But this is where we would need to have those work samples for our standards. Now, there was a big question about, we did update our Ela standards this last spring, and it did add some things. So we have our 2016 standards, and then we have our 2021 standards. In looking at the administrative rules for this exemption, it states that a student has to demonstrate mastery of the standards on the assessment. Our Oklahoma State Testing Program, or OSTP, will be using the 2016 standards for this academic year as they develop those questions for our new standards that were just approved this late this last spring. So because of that, our portfolio requirements should also reflect our 2016 standards. So you'll see those. So if you've already shifted to our new standards, that's okay. Just realize that for our portfolio, they would still align to our 2016 standards for this year. Next year, we will shift to the 2021 standards, both on the OSTP and for our portfolio requirements. Okay. So again, this year kind of becomes a transition year. Should the teacher or the reading specialist complete these, I would have them work in tandem. Remember that the samples that are collected need to be completed by the student on an independent basis. In other words, without help from the teacher at home. I would not do this as homework assignments. So they could be assessments that they are given. It could be we're doing a project. It could be that they are any assignment that they're doing that they're able to complete independently, whether it's in the classroom or with the reading specialist or with another interventionist. That's perfectly fine. It does not specify who that has to be done. So it could be done together as a team as well. Remember that portfolios can also be completed or finished over a summer school. So that can also be helpful there too. So, but just so that you have that idea, remember that to do this, the teacher would gather this information, would be at least the gatekeeper for it, even if somebody else is helping to gather those documents, and present this information to the principal, who would either approve or not approve this as evidence for meeting that exemption. Okay. Let's see, and I've put that part from the administrative rules there that was used to decide that this would be the 2016 standards, and we will shift to the 2021 standards for next year, but not this year. Any questions on those documents or the portfolio?
Is that portfolio for every third grade student or just for a student who has to meet the exemption of a portfolio?
So the way the statute is stated is that any student who is shown not to be meeting grade level targets, so any student who is placed on a reading plan needs to also have that portfolio started, okay? So not necessarily if I have a third grade student who's above target, who's doing just fine, you do not need to gather for them. Some teachers find it easier just to gather it for everybody, and that's perfectly fine. It's definitely going beyond what the law requires. But if you have a student who is struggling, you do need to start that process to get the evidence together.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Steph, I'll double check the link after this call just to make sure why it isn't there. I am not positive. Deb, if you
Clicked on it and it came up for me, so I'm not sure what's wrong.
Okay. And Steph, you might also check on the Google Doc. Remember that you can get in on this running agenda so that you have those links active all there in one place too. Okay, let's flip down to the RSA reading plan. Before I do that, let me answer Rachel's question. Should students considered on watch using STAR be placed on a reading plan? Remember that sometimes with STAR, they'll put that on watch as kind of in the middle. What you're looking for is the 40th percentile is that grade level target. So you might have kids that are on watch who are from the 26th to the 40th, and they might actually be on watch even above that. So you're needing to look at those percentiles of how can we make sure that students who are below that 40th percentile are getting some help, are getting on a plan and making sure that we're monitoring their progress. Okay, RSA Annual District Reading Plan is right now my headache because OMES did a data migration that was desperately needed over the weekend, but unfortunately, the reports on RSA, I have been told, use an application that is older than most of the developers. So big shock to those of you that have used it for quite some time. But as a result, we've noticed that the plan is not saving changes right now that people are making. So if you were planning on going and working on your reading plan, you might hold off because I know your time is valuable and I don't want you wasting a second of it. So we will let you know through the RSA newsletter as soon as that is up and going again. You might check. You can check easily by just trying to make a change, one quick change, and save it and come back to see if it actually saved. If it doesn't, right now, actually, I asked them to take the whole plan offline so that people would not be working on it and not getting their changes saved. If for some reason the plan is down for an extended amount of time, We are working to see if it would be appropriate to extend the window if we need to. Right now, we're just kind of waiting to see if they can get that fixed. If you've already submitted your RSA plan, you're fine. This only messed up over the weekend. It didn't go back and change anything that was already done. And I know we had several schools that had already submitted everything, so you're fine. This just started on a Saturday morning and from there. So if you were working on it Monday or Tuesday, you likely already noticed that changes weren't being saved. But beyond that, as soon as we get that done, it should be fine. But we're starting that process of review. Again, for those of you new to RSA, and I know every year there are some that are new, the reading plan is that document that we use to outline what is it that you will be doing as a district and as a school to meet the needs of your students in K through 3. There is a video tutorial. You can find the link right here on this agenda, where I take about, I think it's about 15 minutes long to just go through step by step each part of the plan to say, here is what we are generally looking for. For example, on a leadership team, we are making sure that we have grade level representation. It's not just a principal and a reading specialist and a counselor, or just a 3rd grade teacher. If this is a K through 3 school, we want that representation from everybody there. Making sure that our funding is appropriate. I know every year I get the question is, can we spend, has flexibility been extended for RSA? RSA funds are meant for K through 3 reading support. So things that help students with K through 3 reading or reading acquisition. So professional development in the area of reading, absolutely. Salaries for interventionists or reading specialists, absolutely, that's fine. Intervention programs, professional development on how to use those intervention programs, all perfectly good things. Supplies that we might need in the classroom in the area of reading, that's fine. Office supplies, not so much. That we have other funding that should be buying our office supplies. But if I'm needing to get things like a whiteboard or a lap board to be able to do things for students to work on, not the big whiteboard that's in your classroom. You know, we have general funding for that, but that lap board for students to be able to do. Magnetic letters that they can manipulate as they're working and building with words. Books for our classroom that can help support our students. The rug for students to sit on, that's not going to help a child to learn how to read. As much as we want to buy those reading rugs, find another funding source. Let's see, what else? Computers and iPads. So we have made exceptions because of distance learning needs. We are still doing that on a case-by-case basis. So if you are feeling that you need to spend some RSA funds on things like laptops for kids or iPads, please shoot me an email and let me know what you're needing. Like specifically, like we need 16 iPads for our 1st grade to help support the online intervention program that we just purchased. You know, that would help us know, just to kind of keep track. Things like that. Can we buy a smart board for our classroom? We're not doing that because that's not helping us with the distance learning. The reason we're making the exception is because we know distance learning is especially difficult for our K through 2 kids learning how to read. So I think that is probably the biggest thing there. And for those of you that open up the RSA plan once we get the application back online, remember there's those 3 initial questions. If you watch that video, I talk about those. But that second question that says, did 100% of your students meet RSA criteria on the OSTP? We're talking about the did they meet it on the OSTP? That means that all of your 3rd grade students took the OSTP and they met criteria. So if you had 50 3rd grade students and 5 of them did not assess, you are not able to answer yes to that question and you'll need to answer no. If you had all of your students that took it except 1, or they all took it, but 1 did not meet criteria, then you still have to answer no. Even if you promoted that student, they still did not meet RSA criteria on the state test. That's the way the statute is worded. and I cannot deviate from that one. Remember that our reading plan right now is due August 30th. If we have an extension, we will make sure that you are aware of that. But right now we're holding on to that August 30th at this time. So let me pause this because I've seen there's a lot of activity in the chat. I haven't really been reading while I was talking because that can be a dangerous thing. Brenda, you want to help me out?
Sure, I've been helping a few people like with newsletter links and things.
Perfect.
And there was a couple of questions again about if they're working on their plan before the weekend, but I think you're fine if you did it before Saturday. So question number 1, are we using the tier 1 recovery category this year?
No, not this year. That's we've not been given that permission from legal to do that.
Okay, and then with the new universal star scale, are the second graders that met their number of 392 last year grandfathered in?
Absolutely, as well as first graders, because remember that 392 is still equivalent to that new number. It's still that 40th percentile, and that was that benchmark that was set. So the number just kind of helps us say this was the easily readable number. So if you had a second grader or first grader that scored 392 on star reading, not on the early literacy, on star reading, then yes, they are eligible for that promotion.
Okay, one more, a little off topic, but what would be a good online platform to help my non-English speaking students?
Oh, that's a good question, and one that I don't know that I have an immediate answer for. So Deb or Brenda, if you could jot down who's asking that question, and so that we can get, let's see, I see Shannon right there. Actually, Shannon, if you wouldn't mind shooting that to me in an email. I'm putting my email address right now in the chat. That way I can research that. I see that Brandy has hopped on and said reading A to Z EL has worked very well for her. So thank you. Imagine Learning, Jennifer has seen. So you've got a couple of colleagues that are sharing a couple of good platforms that have been helpful for them in that. And I know that Brandy and Jennifer are both working with EL students. So that would be good, but I'll see if I can't find anything else, but probably your colleagues are going to be your best bet. Okay. All right.
So far, that's all the questions we have.
Hey, we're doing
there'll be more.
All right, so let's talk real quick about our RSA reports. So the RSA plan we get started with, but we also have some other reports that happen. We have 3 additional reports. You'll see a screenshot right here. You can also find this on the RSA coordinator webpage, just to know where these reports are found, because it can be kind of confusing sometimes. So we have our application of the Reading Sufficiency Act Annual District Reading Plan that's due August 30th. That's our first and more immediate need. We have our Reading Sufficiency Act survey houses our other 2 reports. So the beginning of year report and the end of year report are found on the survey. The beginning of year report will open in September. Right now, I know that's another thing that OMES is working on getting up and running again for us. So once that's open, we'll have until October 1 to complete this. This is where you're reporting your students number of students that you tested, and the number of students that were determined to be at risk for reading difficulties according to your screening assessment. And then finally, the 3rd grade promotion retention report is found on the WAVE. I just communicated again with OMES this morning, and they are working to get that up as quickly as possible because they know that districts need to get started on that. This is where we would report for our 3rd grade students last year that did not meet RSI criteria. How were they promoted and in which pathway, or were they retained? And that report will be due October 31st. We do have on the RSA coordinator webpage, if I come back to this again, there are tutorial videos for each one of those reports that you'll find on this page. So it's very easy just to quickly go through. I would always recommend, if it's not something you've been doing for years and years, just take a few minutes and watch the video. It will help you tremendously because sometimes they get really confusing. Will the RSI items be back up on SSO? I wish I could give you a date. Unfortunately, I don't get to control OMES. It's when they tell me that the problem has been fixed. So we are watching it very, very closely. Okay. Just to keep in mind too, the RSA timeline, again, is a document on our website. And it's going to be a little stubborn and want to.
I shared that one as well, Melissa.
Thank you. Say that. Let me come back up here. You'll see that right there. There we go. And again, it just lets you know the different reports that are due for RSA, when they are due. Hopefully, usually they're supposed to be open in August. Right now, we're waiting on that. So again, we need to make sure that we have those done. So this is just something good to keep handy. And the statutory requirements for each of those, in case you're being asked, why do we have to do this? This is why. This is what we're having to make sure we report. Okay, so again, let's make sure, can we clarify if all of our third graders met RSA criteria by one way or the other? Okay, so let's make sure that we understand what RSA criteria means. So there's RSA criteria, and then there's promotion. So I think what you're asking is if all of our third graders were promoted in one way or the other. That's a very different question than if all of our third graders meet RSA criteria on the OSTP, because remember, that's that first pathway. So that is the requirement to be exempt from completing the RSA reading plan, is that 100% of your students met RSA criteria on the OSTP, okay? The RSA, the other things that are listed, the STAR benchmark, one of the exemptions, those are promotion options, but those are not RSA criteria. Does that help a little bit in clarifying? Perfect, thank you. And then our kindergarten plan's done in August or winter. All kindergarten students must be assessed at the beginning, middle, and end of year, just as our first through third grade students are. Kindergarten students, however, you may, as a district, choose to delay writing a plan for them until after the mid-year assessment, okay? That is a district choice. It's not required until the mid-year. So some of our districts want to get started right away. Others of our districts, especially in some of those districts that have very little participation in pre-K, they might ask that we give them a couple of months to get going into school, or maybe they're right on that edge. They just need that opportunity. So again, you have that option of waiting until mid-year to write that reading plan for those kindergarten students. You can write it earlier if you choose, okay? But not required until winter. Okay, Oklahoma Science of Reading Academies. So if you have not had your head in the sand around me for the last month, you have heard about the Oklahoma Science of Reading Academies. This is something that, I'll be honest, has been something I've been working on for 4 years since I've been in this position to try to get this going. And we have the opportunity with our American Recovery Plan federal dollars, those relief dollars that came through, that we, the state has set aside $13 million of those monies to be able to fund these academies. These will use the language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling, or letters curriculum for these academies, and it's using the 3rd edition. The 3rd edition is a little bit different than what we have done in the past, where we might offer a module here or a module there. So some of you might have gone to module 4 for vocabulary for 2 days, and you learned some great things about vocabulary, but that's all that you really focused on. The 3rd edition is taking all of those modules, the entire comprehensive program, and putting that together. This is delivered in kind of a hybrid model, so that you start off with asynchronous videos, some self-directed, self-paced lessons that would take about an hour a week, where you're watching some videos, you have a text that you can sit there and go along with. And then you are applying what you learned in what we call bridge to practice activities, where you're taking that opportunity to, now I've learned about something, let me go try it out on a couple of kids. At the end of each unit, after every 6 to 8 weeks, you would then have an opportunity to meet live with a facilitator. Some of these will be virtual and some in person. And we'll kind of space that out. This first round for this first group will definitely be virtual, mainly because of travel restrictions. So we'll make sure that we're keeping everyone safe. But at the same time, sometimes we have to be able to offer virtual just even for funding. Any teacher that works in an Oklahoma public school is eligible to participate in this program. We are focused on K through 3 students or educators that work with K through 3 students. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words today. But we have had pre-K teachers express interest, interventionists, reading specialists, administrators. We have even had some of our secondary teachers express interest. That's perfectly fine. What we are making sure that those teachers are aware of is that the curriculum will be geared towards an elementary focus. So if you are not working in those grades, you will need to make those adjustments to keep it relevant for you. That being said, however, I know that there are teachers who go back and forth with where their assignments are, or have maybe they're working with students who are really struggling and want to gain this knowledge to know how to help their students. That's fine. The more impact we have, the better. We also have some of our professors in our colleges that are asking to join us, and we are encouraging them to do that so that they have an opportunity to have an impact on our pre-service teachers. So if you haven't signed up yet, don't wait. We're ready to get you going. We just released those first login information. I think today was some of that first group got their login information, and the rest of them, if you've already signed up, don't have it yet, don't worry, it's coming. We've just had to upload this information in phases, but it is definitely rocking and rolling. We are going to be doing this over 4 different cohorts, and we have a page on the SDE website called the Science of Reading page that will help give you additional information. This is where you can find all of these things. Megan Ashbaugh is our early literacy specialist, and she is taking the reins on this and doing all of the work. So you will get most of your communication from Megan. She's perfectly lovely. Please be nice to her because I want to keep her around. But this gives you a little bit of information about letters. We did do an informational webinar last week. You can find the recording for this webinar as well as the slides that give you some information about what these academies are, what letters is, what you will learn. This is not a program. You are not going to come out of letters with a curriculum ready to implement in the classroom with fidelity. What letters provides is the research behind how we teach children to read. So it's giving you the background, the information, the tools in your toolkit to know how to use your curriculum resources effectively. So if Jennifer is using one curriculum resource in her school and Diane's using a different curriculum resource in her school, they can both take the same knowledge and apply it, because teaching kids to read is teaching kids to read. And some of us have older curriculum where we're needing to fill in some gaps. Some of us have curriculum that has way too much stuff thrown into it. So it helps us know maybe what to weed out, what parts to use, and what parts I can maybe set aside and I don't need to use. It helps us kind of identify some areas where we might need to supplement. So we are actually doing this in 4 different cohorts. So cohort 1 is starting now. And for this first year, we'll be completing what we're calling the first volume, volume 1, which is units 1 through 4. This is dealing primarily with word recognition skills. So participants will learn about how the brain learns to read, what that research is, and then dealing with things like phonemic awareness, phonics, how to get that code lifted off the page. Then the second year, they will work on volume 2, or units 5 through 8. And those units address more of our language comprehension skills. So dealing with vocabulary, grammar, writing, really in comprehension, just understanding how to make sense of what we're reading. Fluency, assessment, that is woven all throughout each of these units, okay? So the first cohort starts now. Second cohort will start in January and be finished in December of 2023. The third cohort will start next August, be finished in May of 2024, and the last cohort will start in January 2023 and end in December 2024, okay? If you have previously participated in some of those modules that we've done in the past, you will likely find a lot of value in this because you already have some information, but this edition has the updated research. Again, it puts it all together and it really aligns more with that adult learning theory, that best practice for how we learn, in that you are learning something, you're immediately applying it, and as you go through these cycles, then you have conversation with a facilitator to help clear up misconceptions or go a little deeper. This is at no cost to participants. On those facilitator days, if a sub is needed for the teacher, then the district will need to cover the cost of that sub. However, we are also making sure that there are opportunities to attend in the evening or on the weekend. And we're finding from a lot of our participants that they want those opportunities because either they don't want to miss that time with kids in the classroom. We all know it's harder to be gone than it is just to show up some days. Or they know that in their area, subs are really hard to find. So in that case, what we are recommending is that if districts are able to use some of their RSA money or some of their ESSER money, their federal relief dollars, they can certainly provide a stipend to teachers who are participating, either for just their time, because it is going to take time outside of the classroom. They might also want to consider providing a stipend if the teacher chooses to attend the live sessions outside of contract hours that might be equivalent in pay to what they would have paid for a sub that day. If a stipend is provided, and if so, how much, is at the discretion of the district. It is just something that a teacher might discuss with their administrator to see if that can be offered. It is not a guarantee, okay? So, but if you are one of those district administrators, that might be a way to help support your teachers, is to give them a little bit of a stipend for their time that they're going to be spending outside of here. We also know that we've had a few people that have completed that first volume of letters. And if you are and you have not received a sign up for volume 2 and want one, if you will email Megan, she will make sure that you have access to that. Okay.
We have lots of questions.
I was going to say, let me stop there because I know I just gave a lot of information.
Okay, let me scroll back up. Okay, so we have kind of a random thing of questions. So if a student is promoted based on a 392 and star, then are they to be put on a reading plan? And are they going to be have an intervention the next year?
So the students who are promoted, that are promoted with an exemption or are promoted through a committee, need to make sure that they are receiving intervention. The ones who are promoted because they met criteria on the state test or promoted through a screening assessment do not have to receive that intervention under RSA. The school may decide they need it, and that's fine, but they don't have it under state law.
If we wait to write kindergarten plans, we still turn in kindergarten numbers in August?
Yes, that's why you still need to assess those kindergarten students, and those kindergarten students who are showing up under the 40th percentile or whatever that number would be for whichever assessment that you're giving. Definitely you want to turn those in. Couple of reasons. One, we keep track of where we're starting there, okay? The other part is that's what your funding is based off of. So you don't want to leave those students out. Remember that when we determine that RSA allocation, we're adding up all of the number of students in your district that you've said are at risk for reading difficulty. And if you're leaving out that whole grade level, then that's shorting yourself some funding that I'm sure you could be using.
Is there a set length of time for benchmark testing windows?
That is up to the district as far as we're looking at that reasonable times of being able to do reports. I will say that best practice when you are considering what the industry is for screening assessment is to set it within a 2-week window. Otherwise, that data is not as comparable with other students. I realize sometimes in our larger schools that can be a little difficult, but again, that's that best practice is to look at that 2-week window in order to get everybody in so that you have a reasonable time to compare data from student to student.
Must the reading plans also be written in Spanish?
There's nothing in state law that I'm aware of with that.
Okay, so you have lots of yays for letting intervention teachers come, but there was one other question for clarification. Are paras who work with students under supervision of a reading specialist eligible for letters?
Yes. Couple of reasons why. One, they're working with a student, so they need to have this information. And we also know that a lot of our paras, sometimes that's a track that they're using to get certified themselves. And so this gives them that opportunity to look for some certification pathways to be able to meet those needs.
So there was one about when they would know if they've been accepted. So I would say Megan's working on that.
Megan's working on that. Basically, if you have filled out that registration form, you're accepted at this point. So just count on it and be looking for that. We were kind of holding off on a few as we were making sure that we could definitely get all of our K-3 teachers in. That does not look to be an issue. So if you're signing in the registration form, be ready. We're having fun with it.
Is there a way for 3 people who teach together to be in the same cohort?
Absolutely. So what we will be doing is we will be posting the opportunities to work with the facilitator, those dates and times, and then you will decide what works with your schedule and be signing up for that. So that will be up to you and what works best for your building. If you're choosing to go during contract time, you may need to stagger if you have multiple teachers in a building in order to make sure that you have enough coverage, if you have subs for that. But especially if you're going outside of contract time, absolutely, I would pull together the teachers that you know and work together. Whether you're able to go to those facilitated classes together or not, based off of that schedule, this is something that is easier to do when you have somebody to talk to about it. And I know I see several people on the call that have gone through letters, at least part of it. And I know that you'll back me up and you say it's a lot of information. It is a ton of information, but it is the most transformative professional development that I have gone to in the 28 years I've been in education. It certainly does help you understand the why that we're doing things. Carol, I love it. Best PD ever. So that helps. I forgot where I was going with that. But the more that we can talk about things, the more that we can process that. PLC time. This is the work of a PLC. So again, our administrators, if you have teachers that are going through this together and have time during their PLC to discuss what they're learning, that's the best thing you can possibly do for them, is to give them that time to collaborate and visit together.
Do teachers know which cohort group they're signed up in?
No, because you're going to be finding out what works best in your schedule. So when we say cohort, we're talking a group of 2,600 teachers. Okay, so that's the level of this cohort. So
my principal asked if this would include any assessments to use in the classroom.
So you will certainly be talking about assessments. They're not going to give you, the only one you'll probably look at, they'll have some phonics surveys, more like the diagnostic type assessments. So, remember when you give a screening assessment, for example, you give Acadians and you have a student that is flagging as at risk, those diagnostic assessments like a phonics screener or a phonemic awareness screener help you identify specifically where that student is struggling. And there are some that they will have access to that you can utilize, yes. And more importantly, know how to give and how to interpret.
If a teacher is teaching students not in K through 3, is it allowable to pay them a stipend out of RSA funding?
For reading professional development, yes. Just don't ask too loud.
Yeah. Are there any updates to the reading plan forms?
That is the only form that I did not have a chance to touch yet. I will look at that and see if we need to. I know that we definitely need to change the year on it. There shouldn't be a ton since we just did a massive update to it last year and there were no changes in the legislation, but I'll double check and just make sure and get that taken care of by the end of this week.
If parents speak another language, the district must provide a translator, correct?
That I am not as well versed on what is required and what's recommended. Definitely recommended. I'm just not sure what the requirement there is. So let me find out, and whoever has that question, if you'll again shoot that to me in an email, I will make sure I have an answer for you.
It's Jennifer, so we'll remember.
Oh, Jennifer.
So I like what Jennifer said about having a study buddy and a conversation pal with letters, because when I went through it the first time, not actually being in the classroom teaching reading, but being a social studies person, it was very helpful to have someone to talk to. So I liked her idea of having a conversation pal, and Kristen with teamwork. If teachers have done the second edition modules 1, 2, and 3, can they enroll in volume 2?
So actually, because when they redid the edition, the modules that would align, that would say volume 1 would be volumes 1, 2, 3, and 10 would be equivalent to volume 1. So Billy, if you have somebody in that position, shoot me an email so that we can talk about that a little bit and the pros and cons of doing that. Okay.
Okay, I received an email from Elijah Bryant from Lexia Learning about signing through them for the next Oklahoma Letters cohort. Is this the same or disregard?
So Elijah is the rep from Lexia, is the company that sponsors letters. They were Voyager Sopris. They're transitioning to the name Lexia, so you'll see both. And Elijah is the Oklahoma rep. So he's basically just helping promote this again. So that's the Oklahoma Letters cohort is the Oklahoma Science of Reading Academies. They are one and the same there. So yes, it's the same thing, Angela. You're good. Oh, thank you, Kristen. And 7. I knew I was forgetting 1. 1, 2, 3, 7, and 10 would be second edition modules that are equivalent to volume 1. Okay.
So there was just a comment sent to me that this is being recorded and Melissa will share it. So if you join late or had to leave early, of course, if you had to leave early, you're not on here now, but if you came in late, then yes, she has it recorded.
Absolutely. And so on the RSA coordinator website, you'll see at the very top of this page, there's the link to the running agenda document that we've been looking at. This is the Zoom ID and passcode that you use today and will be in use for every single one of our meetings this year. And then as soon as I get the recording back from communications after they have done their magic and got it uploaded onto YouTube, I will have it linked right here so that you are able to access that. So you'll see all of our dates for this year. And then once they are linked, you'll be able to find those recordings. If you want to go back and watch our recordings from last year because you just can't sleep and this puts you to sleep in a great way, you can find them at the bottom of this page. We didn't get rid of them. We just moved them to the bottom. And there you can take a nice little snooze with the voice with my voice in your head, which I know everybody wants.
So when will our Reading Academy curriculum arrive, or who will it arrive from? Sorry, who will it arrive from?
It will arrive from Lexia. So that registration form is being completed. We upload that to Lexia and you will receive 2 emails from Lexia, one with your username and one with your password. And then you will also receive those print materials from Lexia. Give them, I believe we said 5 to 10 business days to get that. Hopefully once we get things going, it'll be a little faster than that, but we just know that sometimes it can take a little bit, but this has been a pretty big lift to try to get this off the ground. So as we're getting those kinks worked out, it's a coming. All right, since we're kind of slowing down on those questions, I just wanted to make you aware of a couple of upcoming professional development opportunities. This Saturday, the Reading League Oklahoma is doing their kickoff for the year. If you're not familiar with the Reading League Oklahoma, it is a nonprofit organization here in Oklahoma that is with the mission to promote the knowledge, the use, and the application of evidence-based reading instruction. So it really goes hand in hand with what we're constantly talking about. That was going to be a live session, but with our numbers on the rise, it was decided to shift this to a virtual session. The good news there is that opens up more opportunities for people to go. So the keynote will be Karen Chenoweth. If you're not familiar with Karen, she is the host of the Extraordinary Districts podcast. If you were hearing at some point about the districts of Lane and Cottonwood being highlighted for their extraordinary work, it is Karen and her podcast that was doing that highlighting. So she is based out of DC. She is with Education Trust, and she has just released a new book about those talking about 6 districts, Lane and Cottonwood being one of those 6 that she is highlighting nationally. So it's nice that we have that connection, that Oklahoma connection with Karen, and she will be joining us to talk a little bit about building on solid ground as we're coming off of our pandemic. And then we will also have Kristen Perez-Rickles from the State Department of Education. She is with our Otis team, and she will talk about leveraging that system level data to improve student outcomes. We know that this year, more than any other year, knowing that data and how to interpret that is going to be really critical. And then finally, Gwen Strong will be doing a presentation called 90-Minute Magic. How do we get all of those things in that we need to address in our reading block into 90 minutes? And so she's going to have that opportunity to visit with us about how to really address those good high practice activities to help our students really learn. You can find the registration link right here. Just again, it's a free opportunity. Just need to register ahead of time so that we can make sure that we have that space. Also coming up on Friday, September 24th, the Oklahoma State Higher Regents is doing their annual reading conference. Again, they have their online reading registration. This is not a free conference. This does have a fee to it. If you register by August 31st, it is $40 after that time until the deadline on September 22nd is $50 per person. The speakers do include Jennifer Saraballo, Dr. Sherry Vicinda, and some other person from the State Department that they have put on there. Sorry, I get a little bit slap happy by this time of the day. Those of you that know me well know that. So again, this is another opportunity to continue that learning. And then finally, we will meet again on September 8th. Same ID for the Zoom, same passcode, and then you will have those recordings and that running agenda at the top of the page. Okay. Are RSA funds allowable to cover that funding? Yes, you can. This is reading professional development, and it's an appropriate use for RSA funds if you're wanting to send some people. So, and again, that is a virtual conference, so that's something that you can have them listen to there. So, all right, anything else? High fives for Megan, yes, on our doing all the work. Guys, seriously, trying to get this many people registered at once and keeping everything straight, Megan is an angel, so we love that. So thank you very much for that recognition for Megan. She's doing an awesome job. Okay, if there's any other questions, we'll stick around, but that is what we have for you today. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions in the meantime, don't hesitate to let one of us know. Again, you have direct access to our emails right there. Know that we are in the office 3 days a week. We are working remotely 2 days a week, just because we have found out that that's something that's possible to do, and it's wonderful. The email is always usually the best way to get a hold of us. and it can be either of the three of us. We're always available. We will let you know as soon as single sign-on is up and running. Trust me, we want that as much, if not more than you do, because we have 940 plans to read as quickly as possible, and we'd like to get started. So, but thank you all. Stay safe.
There was one last question about, does the 90-minute reading block still have to be continuous, or can it be broken up?
It can be broken. It does not have to be uninterrupted. However, I am going to say, make sure that we are not piecemealing little things together. It shouldn't be 10 minutes here, 15 minutes here. But if you needed to do 45 minutes, then take a break in your schedule for some specials or something, and then come back and do another 45 minutes or an hour and then 30 minutes. Those would be logical breaking points to be able to do that. And that would make sense, and still keeping within that best practice. What we don't want to see is we're doing 10 minutes here, 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there, because we all know that on paper that can add up to 90, but in reality, it'll be a lot closer to 45. So the idea is that we want sufficient time to be able to address everything that we need to address with our reading instruction. But we also know we have to work within the reality of dealing with schedules and specials and things like that. And I know a lot of our schools are still promoting the uninterrupted time, and that probably is a really good idea. I would encourage that. But in a closer reading of the legislation, that was something that we were trying to help those schools that had some really extenuating circumstances. Like maybe one PE teacher that comes in and works with them on one day, and they have to be able to be a little more flexible with that schedule.
Can RSA funds be used to buy the dyslexia screener?
Yes, RSA funds can be used to purchase screeners for RSA, for dyslexia, diagnostic assessments, anything having to do with reading. Okay, can't use it to buy a math assessment. Okay, but yes, you can use it to do anything for reading. And the thing is, remember that dyslexia is a form of a reading disability. It's a difficulty with reading, and that is really the purpose of RSA, is finding those difficulties with reading and addressing them. So it's not a completely separate thing. They are so tightly intertwined that you really cannot separate them. Tier 3 would, Tier 3, yeah, Vicki, let me, Tier 3 would be those students who are well below their peers, more than a year behind their peers. And a lot of times we're looking at that at the 10th percentile and below. That Tier 2 would be those students that are usually 6 months to a year behind their peers. So that would be usually that 11th to 25th percentile. That 26th to 39th percentile is where we need to be able to provide some differentiation, some intervention, but it's a little more difficult to identify a specific tier there. Let me get a little bit better description, maybe down on paper, that would be helpful with that. Okay, so give me a couple of days to get that out. All right. Well,
I don't see anything else.
I don't either. Well, all of you stay safe. Enjoy the, I know we had a little shower here a little bit ago, so I bet it's nice and humid. Have a great weekend. And I hope the beginning of everyone's year is going as smoothly as possible. So, but if there's anything else that we can do for you, we'll let you know. Connie, anything that I get out, I will put not only on our RSA newsletter, but I will also put on that RSA coordinator webpage. Okay, that's my main sourcing for anything that we're needing to make sure that documents that people have access to is that RSA coordinator webpage. But then we try to make those alerts come through on the RSA newsletter as well. So if you haven't signed up for that RSA newsletter, please do so. Okay, that's how we can make sure that you're aware of all those things. All right, thank you all and have a great evening.
So Tanya was asking, where do you sign up? So I'm not sure.
So
maybe for the newsletter, I'm not sure.
So Tanya, actually, let me go back to sharing my screen real fast and show you. If you will go to the main SDE page, sde.ok.gov, and you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see newsletter sign up. You just enter in your email address and hit go, and then it will have a long list of different content area newsletters that you can sign up for, okay? Real easy to do. You could get where you could get a very full inbox every single day if you wanted one. And if that's what you want, let me know. I'll send a few emails your way. So, but yeah, it's real easy to do. You just have to find it there on the beginning of that page. All right. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend.